They want to bleed you out, Pam, not just your career, your very name. The warning rang in Pam Bondi's ears long after Mariner's encrypted call went dead. It was a brisk Florida dawn, the kind old-timers say carries the tang of salt and promise, yet her Tampa office felt more like a bunker. Sunlight slanted across diplomas and football memorabilia, but she barely saw them. The envelope on her desk swallowed every ray. Confidential block letters, crimson ink, no return address. Lauren, her steady-as-granite secretary, had delivered it with trembling hands and the hollow whisper of a woman who had seen too much cable news the night before. Pam slit the seal, expecting another routine brief. Instead, she found political nitroglycerin, a leaked group chat thread in which Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the progressive firebrand cable pundits love to parade, called Bondi, a fossil fuel hatchet woman, ordered staff to dig until something sticks, and most damning typed the chilling line, "True or not, bury her before this explodes." The words pulsed on the page like fresh bruises. Bondi's jaw flexed. She'd fought rumors before Remember 2013, the $25,000 donation from the Trump Foundation, when newspapers hinted she'd sold out an investigation, yet the ethics watchdogs cleared her. She had survived that firestorm standing upright. But this was different. This was a sitting congresswoman directing a digital mob to destroy her reputation for sport. Mariner's note lay beneath the printout's short and stark tip from Hill Star full court press coming. If you don't strike first, they'll paint you as crooked by nightfall. For a heartbeat, Pam considered the usual play, breathe, ride it out, trust the truth to surface. But a veteran's instinct told her the old rules were gone. In the social media coliseum, lies lapped the globe before fact cleared its throat. Silence read as guilt. Hesitation wrote your epitaph. She rose, smoothed her blazer, and called Lauren back in. "Summon the war room," she said, voice level as a judge's gavel. 5 minutes. They assembled fast. Benjamin Cross, silver-haired litigator with a memory for case law that scared junior associates. Eleanor, media strategist who could spin lead into line-danceable country. 2 research analysts, eyes already flicking across screens, and a paralegal clutching a binder thicker than a Sunday Bible. Pam laid out the facts page by venomous page. She gave them AOC's quotes, the directive to ruin her legal standing, the timing that linked the leak to tomorrow's Energy Committee vote. When she finished, the room sat grave and silent, but for the distant whir of a coffee grinder. Cross spoke first. "We sue. Federal court. Defamation per se. $80 million big enough to rattle every press desk in Manhattan." Eleanor hesitated. "The optics, Pam. They'll cry you're muzzling free speech." Pam met her gaze, steel behind patient blue eyes. Free speech ends where knowing falsehood begins. She crossed that line. She tapped the damning line again. True or not? Actual malice on a platter. The team nodded, gears turning. Research would pull every reckless tweet AOC ever fired, including that Met Gala ethics probe still hanging over her head, 5-0 vote from OCE for a deeper look. They'd chart the $6,000 payment to her boyfriend that the FEC poked at. Not to smear, but to establish a pattern disregard for rules, a mindset willing to skate past truth when narrative suited. Pam inhaled, steadied. File before midnight. And Elena draft a statement, calm, firm, no theatrics. Americans respect resolve, not tantrums. Lauren re-entered, held up Pam's buzzing phone. "It's Fox and CNN, Mom. They both just need a quick quote." "Not yet." She pocketed the device. "We move on our schedule." As staff scattered to their tasks, Pam drifted to the window. Beyond the glass bay, water shimmered copper. She recalled her father's counsel. You fight clean even when they don't. Good advice in simpler times, before likes turned to lynch mobs. Could she still live it? She felt the gut-level certainty of righteous anger, but also the sober weight of precedent. This suit would set one. Win and every public servant had a shield. Lose and the mob found a map. Cross lingered. "There's one more piece," he said. He slid a draft complaint across the sill. 60 pages, footnotes ablaze. Damages $80,000.0. The zero, a bold stroke mocking the notion reputational wounds could be neatly tallied. Pam signed without flourish. Clock starts now, Cross said, voice low. Somewhere a television began replaying AOC's latest live rant, her face-flushed fists carving the air while donors cheered her on. Pam turned away. She had no time for theatre. The law was calling, and the law, unlike the internet, demanded evidence, not emojis. Beneath the hush of reverent activity, the suit clicked through secure servers, racing toward the federal docket like a steel-tipped arrow. In New York, cameras kept rolling. On Capitol Hill, phones vibrated with words the Congresswoman would soon regret. And in a quiet Tampa office, one woman braced for the storm, unafraid to meet it head-on. By the time dusk settled on Manhattan, the suit had already leaked, and the chattering class pounced like gulls on an open dumpster. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in a glass-walled studio 31 floors above 7th Avenue ring lights, blazing against the twilight, while her media aide Marcus paced just out of frame. Analytics on his tablet, spiked red cable hosts were reading Bondi's complaint line for line, replaying the phrase, "true or not," bury her with the deliberation of a hanging judge. AOC tried to keep her spine straight, shoulders squared the way advisors taught in freshman orientation. But her screen showed a different story. Donors texting question marks. Friendly columnists asking for comment. The House Ethics Committee requesting clarification about that Met Gala gift file OCE had flagged last year. She scrolled past the $35,000 ticket number, no time to relitigate, and punched call on Carmen, her communications director. "We need a counter-strike," she hissed. Carmen whispered back that Progressive Talk Radio wanted her live in 30 minutes, but Marcus shook his head violently. "Not without a lawyer present," he mouthed. Across town, Pam Bondi had already booked Fox for sunrise. The Congresswoman's jaw ticked. She imagined Bondi's calm Florida drawl painting her as a serial rule-breaker, the boyfriend consultant payment. The FEC shrugged at the designer gown ethics complaint, now a defamation suit that named her staff's own words as Exhibit A. In politics, image can survive many dents, but malice proved in court stains like axle grease. Natalie's senior policy advisor stepped into the light voice low. "The draft statement's ready. You condemn dark money smears. You welcome a robust debate. You deny defamation." AOC scanned the copy. It read like something a corporate risk officer would pen. She pictured Tucker Carlson calling it weasel words. "I'm not hiding behind legalese," she snapped and tossed the paper. Marcus inhaled as if to argue, but Carmen's phone pinged. Breaking Bondi had filed in the district court for the District of Columbia federal venue, speedy docket, a judge appointed by Reagan. The aide paled. "If they fast-track discovery, they'll subpoena everything, emails, Slack burner numbers." Someone cursed softly. The sound hung like smoke. Outside the window, towers flickered to life, each pane reflecting a city that loved nothing more than a fall from grace. AOC felt the familiar burn of righteousness rise. The instinct that built her brand never retreat counterpunch harder. She signaled for the Instagram feed. Marcus protested. She silenced him with a look sharper than studio glass. The red dot lit. "Good evening, friends," she began, steady but cold. "Tonight, a powerful Republican operative backed by billionaire oil money just sued me for $80 million. They want to scare us." She laid out climate votes, corporate PAC charts, a 30-second reel of smokestacks over children's playgrounds. Viewership soared. Yet in the scrolling comments, a new tone emerged. Supporters asking for receipts, moderates warning this could backfire. And then a single line from a verified reporter scrolled past Bondi's lawyers. "Have the leak, and metadata proves it's from your office. Care to respond?" The Congresswoman's throat tightened. She pivoted, doubling down, calling the suit a tantrum by the fossil fuel machine, promising to fight in and out of court. Marcus cut the feed before she drifted further, but the damage was done. The clip would loop all night. In a law firm lounge 2 time zones away, Bondi's team saved the footage in a deposition folder labeled "Defendant Reaffirms Claim." 10 minutes later, back in the studio hallway, Carmen's phone rang again. House leadership. They wanted AOC in a closed door at 8 sharp, no staff. The subtext needed no translation. Donors were skittish. The trial threatened midterm messaging. The party could not bleed on this scale. AOC pocketed the phone pulse, hammering. Pride told her to storm the hill and dare them to silence a Bronx daughter. But another voice, one she hated, whispered that she might already be losing. Marcus handed her the printed complaint, 60 pages dense with citations ending in bold. Damages demanded 80,000 do's and D's a 0 cents. The zero mocked her, implied the issue was honor, not profit. She felt the corridor tilt. If Bondi proved malice, a jury of ordinary citizens, many who watched cable news more than C-SPAN, could crater everything she'd built. Behind her, the studio door clicked shut, sealing off the stage lights. Ahead lay a night of frantic calls, lawyers drafting motions, leadership twisting arms, supporters begging clarity. And somewhere beyond that, a courtroom where the glare would be brighter than any ring light. She exhaled, squared her shoulders once more, and stepped into the elevator, unaware that at that very moment, an exhausted junior aide in her district office was forwarding yet another internal email. One she thought harmless, straight to Mariner's encrypted inbox. The doors slid closed on 6th Avenue traffic, leaving only the soft hum of dissent and the question hanging in the metal silence when the sun rose. Would she still control her own story, or had she already handed it over to the court of public opinion? Daybreak rolled over Washington in a pale wash of slate, and the Capitol dome glimmered like a cold beacon as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez strode into the speaker's suite. Security guards offered stiff nods. Inside, the air felt refrigerated on purpose. Nancy Pelosi presided at the head of a walnut table flanked by Chuck Schumer, 2 ranking committee chairs, and a clutch of senior strategists whose laptops already glowed with polling data. No cameras, no staff, just brass tacks. Schumer didn't bother with pleasantries. He tapped the lawsuit printout. 80 million and evidence of actual malice, he said. This is more than a Twitter brawl. It's a live shell on the House floor. AOC folded her arms, holding the line. Pelosi's tone was clinician calm. Alexandria donors are rattled. Midterms are close. We need a plan that contains collateral damage. A younger strategist chimed in, recommending a statement of regret without admission. Another floated a short leave of absence, 2 weeks, let the headlines cool. The suggestions hit AOC like mic drops in an empty gym. She fired back, reminding them Bondi served oil executives and Trump cash. She's weaponizing the courts to silence dissent, AOC said. If I fold, we teach every billionaire they can buy a muzzle warrant. The room thickened. Schumer rubbed his brow. We're not asking for surrender. We're asking for discipline. But discipline looked to AOC like kneeling. She told them so, voice steady yet brittle. Pelosi's reply was soft steel. Leadership means weighing the mission against the self. If that balance tilts you, tip the whole caucus. No verdict reached the meeting, broke in uneasy truce, Pelosi's parting words hanging. Consider your next move carefully. Across town, Pam Bondi arrived at D.C. Superior Court for a procedural conference. Reporters massed behind rope lines, microphones angled like bayonets. But Bondi's gait was a lesson in composure. Benjamin Cross walked beside her, briefing last-minute numbers, conservative PAC donations up 20% overnight, Fox booking her for a Sunday exclusive, and most crucial word that the judge, a no-nonsense Reagan appointee, might consider expedited discovery. Bondi nodded once. Inside the courthouse opposing counsel, Marisa Vega waited dark circles under sharp eyes. She tried to project confidence, yet Bondi saw the tension in her grip on a legal pad. The hearing lasted only 15 minutes, but fireworks cracked. Cross requested an order preserving all digital communications from AOC's office dating back 12 months. Vega labeled it phishing. The judge, spectacles low on his nose, said he'd rule by end of week and reminded both sides that in defamation, transparency is not optional. AOC's team would have to lock every email, text and Slack thread. No deletions, no lost phones under penalty of contempt. Court adjourned. In the hallway, Bondi paused for a single statement. My reputation isn't for sale, and it's not a plaything. We welcome the facts in open court. Then she and Cross walked out to a whir of shutters and shouts, neither breaking stride. By noon, cable networks erupted. CNN looped Bondi's hallway clip. MSNBC ran panels asking whether this was the moment progressives learned humility. On Fox, the banner read, "Iron Lady takes the hill." Call-in lines filled with truckers and retirees praising Bondi for fighting cancel culture. Meanwhile, Bondi doctrine trended on X without a single meme, only comments from older voters lauding a return to accountability. Inside AOC's district office, staff hovered over monitors as sentiment charts reddened. Natalie muttered that the base was splintering. Carmen drafted rebuttal posts but saw dwindling traction. Facebook's own analytics showed suburban independents drifting toward Bondi's side. Worse, Mariner's encrypted account pinged a reply, "Got something bigger. Check drop at 1500. Carmen's stomach lurched. She suspected another leak, but couldn't confirm. She braved a call to Marcus, who was already mid-crisis prepping for a potential subpoena blitz. "If there's fresh material out there, we're finished," he said. "You need to find the leak now." 3 p.m. sharp, Mariner published. Politico got the scoop, then the Washington Post, an internal AOC email dated 8 weeks earlier, subject line, "Neutralize Bondi." It laid out a 3-point plan to tie Bondi to dark money donors, stoke environmental protests at her speaking gigs, and amplify any personal dirt, verified or not. The damning phrase "verified or not" lit every newsroom like gasoline. Within an hour, talk radio hosts hammered it as proof AOC had endorsed a smear machine. Ethics watchdogs issued press releases calling for a House inquiry. Carmen's phone exploded. Natalie's eyes glossed. In the war room, Slack junior staff began quitting in real time, dropping sorry emojis despite standing instructions not to. AOC hurried from a Solar Jobs presser back to her Hill office reporters, shouting questions about Neutralize Bondi. She kept walking, but cameras caught the flicker of alarm. At dusk, Bondi's team met in a Georgetown townhouse for strategy. Cross laid out the new headline on a projector, grinning. "This validates actual malice," he said. "We move for summary judgment," Elena cautioned patience. The public loved a fight but distrusted gloating. Bondi agreed. "We stay measured," she said. "Let them unravel." Still, the weight of momentum pressed even her ribs. She wondered if AOC understood how fast political ground turns to quicksand once trust cracks. Outside the window, Potomac traffic hummed in twilight. Cross took a call. Yes, a senior Democrat had just floated a settlement feeler. Bondi arched an eyebrow. Too soon, she murmured, but filed it away. Power was shifting, and the trick was not to overplay a winning hand. Back on the Hill, lights burned late in AOC's suite. Lawyers argued over privilege logs, staff scrambled to image hard drives, and shredders sat silent, too risky to use. In a corner, Layla, the lone aide still loyal, whispered, "Alex, we can still apologize, settle cap the damages." AOC stared at the Neutralize Bondi headline glowing on her phone. Pride warred with survival. She pictured the Bronx voters who saw her as a warrior, not a penitent. She pictured bankruptcy. Midnight approached, and with it the judge's impending preservation order, the party's waning patience, the next leak she couldn't predict. Her silence filled the room like smoke until Layla asked again, softer, "What's our move?" AOC finally spoke, voice barely above a breath. "We fight." Yet even she felt the tremor in the words, as if some hidden fault line had begun to crack faster than resolve could patch it, and somewhere in that widening gap, tomorrow's headlines waited with sharpened teeth. Night gripped the city, and with it came an electric strain that seeped into every back stairwell and basement bar on Capitol Hill. While K Street lobbyists traded gossip over bourbon, Pam Bondi entered a quiet radio studio on M Street for what producers were billing as the late-night town square. No TV lights, only the warm thrum of an AM transmitter that still reached truckers rumbling down I-40 and retired Marines polishing shotguns in Montana. The host, a Vietnam vet, famous for carving through spin, asked the question older listeners wanted answered. "Ma'am, have we lost the decency to disagree?" Bondi cleared her throat, speaking not like a politician but like the prosecutor she once was. She told them reputations were getting cheaper by the tweet that the court wasn't a cudgel, but sometimes the last safe harbour. Callers lit up the switchboard, steelworkers, homemakers, a tear-choked pastor from Tulsa, each story a fresh indictment of the digital gallows. Bondi finished the segment with a promise that due process still mattered, then slipped back into the humid night where Eleanor waited under a street lamp phone screen glowing. Cross had texted order granted. Judge signed the preservation directive at 22:17. Defendant's devices, frozen cloud archives, locked compliance deadline 48 hours. Bondi exhaled, the first brick of her case now cemented by judicial ink. On the other side of town, AOC's office looked like a tech startup after a cyber attack. Forensics contractors wheeled in imaging rigs while staff queued laptops like penitents waiting for absolution. Marcus cursed the ticking clock. Each gigabyte cloned meant another chance for hostile counsel to unearth half-baked brainstorms, snarky jokes, anything that smelled like ill intent. Carmen tried to rally what little crew remained, but morale hemorrhaged. Natalie was gone, resignation email timestamped 30 minutes before the order hit. Even Daniel, the kid who lived on Red Bull and righteous memes, was scrubbing his resume. AOC paced phone dark because every text was now potential evidence. She told herself warriors don't flinch. Still, the silence felt carnivorous. At 1 a.m., a new crisis burst through the dam. Politico posted an exclusive citing Capitol insiders who claimed AOC's team had quietly met with an outside PR firm to build a parallel narrative painting Bondi as compromised by prior ethics clouds. The leak named the firm, the invoice, the timing 3 days before the neutralized Bondi memo. Within minutes, Fox and then CNN pushed the alert. Marcus's face blanched. That invoice sat somewhere in archived email, now preserved, retrievable and radioactive. He muttered about spoliation, about how even the whiff of evidence tampering could swing a jury in Bondi's favor. Layla fetched AOC a coffee gone cold before it hit the desk. The Congresswoman's mind rifled backward to the meeting that birthed the idea. She'd approved the spend with a curt nod, distracted by a committee hearing. It felt tactical then. It felt like proof of malice now. Meanwhile, Benjamin Cross drafted a midnight filing notice of the Politico article request to expand discovery to outside vendors linked to AOC, plus a reminder that any PR materials touching the case were squarely within scope. He emailed the motion to the clerk CC'd Bondi, then poured a neat scotch. Across from him, Eleanor slid a one sheet of talking points under his glass stay humble stress transparency, remind viewers Bondi herself turned over every Trump Foundation file years ago and came out clean. Cross raised an eyebrow. "We're not hubristic," he said. "We're methodical." Elena smiled, knowing juries loved methodical. Dawn's first blue smudge edged the horizon when an exhausted junior aide named Tessa slipped out of AOC's suite, clutching a thumb drive. She'd seen enough emails ordering character hit spreadsheets ranking pressure points on Bondi's allies, a draft slide deck titled 80 Million Reasons She Must Fold. Tessa's conscience screamed louder than party loyalty now. She walked 8 blocks to a nondescript cafe that opened for pre-commute espresso, sat in a corner booth, and messaged Mariner, "I have documents. Need protection." 3 grey ticks confirmed reception. The reply came back cold and fast. "Meet tonight, same spot as whistleblower 2. Tessa swallowed hard. The walls felt thinner than paper. If Bondi's lawyers got this trove, it could end not just the lawsuit, but AOC's career and every staffer tethered to it. Still, she couldn't unsee the contempt in those memos, couldn't justify silence. She tucked the drive into a coat pocket and stepped into the street as sirens wailed toward the hill. Another dawn, another crisis. Back at her apartment, AOC finally collapsed onto a sofa, littered with briefing folders. The TV muted, she stared at the Crawl House leadership said to consider formal ethics review. The screen cut to a panel discussing whether campaign funds might cover an $80 million judgment. The answer was no. Bankruptcy laws didn't bend for bad PR. AOC's chest tightened. She had built a movement on fearless authenticity, but authenticity was now evidence. Could she pivot, apologize, settle, preserve the mission, or would that brand her a sellout forever? She shut her eyes. In the hush, the buzz of her phone vibrated again and again, a cacophony of donors, reporters, maybe even friends, all demanding an answer she no longer knew how to give. As the sun crested and reporters gathered for their morning live shots, Bondi buttoned her blazer for the Fox interview, the preservation order freshly printed in her briefcase, the wind finally at her back. Across town, AOC stared at the thumb drive gap in Tessa's desk drawer, a chill blooming in her stomach. 2 women, 1 city, and a day poised to decide which would bend and which would break, because the next move once made could not be taken back. Morning news opened with Pam Bondi's face framed against the Capitol dome, her tone measured as ever, while Fox's anchor tossed softballs about free speech and accountability. Across living rooms in Ohio and diners in South Carolina, viewers nodded along when she reminded them that reputations take a lifetime to earn and one careless lie to scorch. The anchor closed by quoting, "Lincoln truth is generally the best vindication," and the segment cut to commercial with a graphic that read, "Bondi 1 Machine 0." At that exact second, a bleary-eyed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hustled through a basement corridor beneath the Rayburn building toward a hastily called caucus huddle. The walls dripped with condensation from overworked air handlers, and each echoing footfall felt like a gavel. Inside the cramped hideaway office, leadership aides lined the perimeter, laptops open to real-time donor dashboards flashing warning red. A committee chair cleared his throat. "We're facing an ethics petition within 48 hours, unless you provide an off-ramp." AOC stiffened. Meaning a public mea culpa, he said. "A clear statement that staff went rogue, that you regret the rhetoric, and that you'll consider mediation." She lifted her chin. "And paint myself as weak, not happening." The room inhaled as though sharing one lung. In the corner, a whip's deputy muttered about collateral campaigns in battleground districts. Politics, AOC realized, had an appetite even a movement couldn't satisfy. It ate whoever proved most vulnerable, then moved on. At noon, Bondi met Benjamin Cross in a drab conference room overlooking the Potomac. He slid a folder across the table. "We have new intel," he said. Inside lay screenshots from Mariner Fresh Leaks, showing a spreadsheet titled Contingency Comms Force Settlement. Each row mapped amplifier influencers to narrative pushes targeting older viewers with phrases like Bondi Trump payoff and big oil puppet. Cross tapped to sell, time-stamped 2 days before the lawsuit. "This, Pam, is the smoking gun squared." Bondi's stomach clenched not from fear, but from the cold clarity of momentum. "Chain of custody?" she asked. "Clean. Your whistleblower delivered to Mariner. An hour ago, Mariner verified metadata. We confirm hash values tonight." Bondi closed the folder. Once filed, that evidence would blast through cable news like a thunderclap. She pictured jurors, mostly parents, grandparents, reading a spreadsheet that treated character assassination like a marketing campaign. Cross read her thoughts. "We hold it until the first deposition," he said. "Let them walk into the trap, then drop the hammer." 3 miles away, Carmen discovered Tessa missing. Her cubicle sat eerily neat drawers, pulled bare chair, pushed in with military precision. A post-it note read, "Needed air. Back tomorrow." Carmen's phone buzzed. A reporter wanted comment on rumors of mass staff turnover. She stonewalled, then hustled to Marcus's office, where half-packed boxes testified to his own thin ice status. She took something, Carmen whispered. Marcus rubbed bloodshot eyes. "Doesn't matter, we're already in triage." He revealed an email from AOC's personal attorney discovery list, demanded phone records, consulting invoices, and every Slack export, including private channels once thought invisible. Marcus exhaled. "If they find that contingency file, we're done." Carmen didn't mention she'd just learned exactly that. Late afternoon turned humid thunderheads piling over Virginia. Bondi sat for makeup in a CNN green room, producers promising a fair but firm segment. She knew the drill, friendly at Fox, polite at CNN, neutral wording for AP. Consistency mattered. While powder dusted her cheeks, Elena whispered that donors aged 60+ were opening their wallets faster than during Kavanaugh. Bondi nodded, mindful not to celebrate, but to appreciate. The Republic still had immune cells. In the interview, she avoided gloating, spoke of restoring guardrails, and concluded with a gentle appeal. "We can disagree on policy and still refuse to scorch the earth." Back home, screens flashed viewer polls. 63% agreed Bondi was reasonable. Only 21% saw the suit as intimidation. Cross texted one word surge. Twilight brought Tessa to a weathered townhouse in Shore. Mariner opened the door without lights, gestured her inside, and locked 3 deadbolts. In the kitchen, a laptop glowed beside a portable scanner. Tessa's thumb drive trembled between her fingers. "I don't want to destroy anyone," she said, voice cracking, but they crossed a line. "This is organized defamation." Mariner nodded, slid coffee across the table, and asked if she understood whistleblower protections. Tessa shrugged. "I understand the truth. They cloned the drive, hashed files, encrypted duplicates." Mariner would pass one copy to Bondi's counsel, another to the post holding release, until legal safe harbors cleared. As Tessa left, rain began falling, each drop a drumbeat on corrugated awning, and she wondered if she'd just freed herself or lit the match that would incinerate her career. Across town, AOC stood at her apartment window, watching lightning spider the sky. Layla handed her a draft apology, but the words tasted like ash. "If I sign this, I kill the movement," she murmured. Layla tried. "Sometimes retreat saves the army." Outside, thunder rolled. AOC's phone vibrated again. 3 missed calls from her mother, 2 from the New York Times, 1 from an unknown number she suspected was Bondi's camp probing settlement. She powered it down. For the first time, the Congresswoman felt an unfamiliar emotion, dread that the next sunrise might bring a headline no speech could drown. She turned away from the glass, unaware that in a quiet townhouse 15 blocks north, a progress bar reached 100%, sealing her fate in a file named Exhibit 15, Campaign Playbook.pdf. And as the storm crashed over the city, both women braced for the morning when sealed evidence would open, allies would scatter, and the real cost of narrative warfare would finally come due. Dawn broke with the sulky light that follows an all-night storm, and Washington smelled of wet asphalt and scorched ozone. Before the first delivery truck rattled down Independence Avenue, Benjamin Cross e-filed Bondi's amended complaint attaching Exhibit 15, the campaign playbook Tessa had leaked under seal for judicial eyes only. Within minutes, the clerk docketed it, flagging a notice of intent to unseal at the next status hearing. Cross barely finished his coffee when Reuters blasted an alert. Bondi motion hints at organized defamation scheme. Sealed evidence pending. Cable producers pounced. By 6 a.m., Fox was hyping a paper trail worse than Watergate, while CNN's Kyron asked whether progressive politics had crossed a moral Rubicon. The narrative shifted so fast, it left staffers spinning. Whatever goodwill AOC still possessed among middle-aged moderates evaporated like mist. Pam Bondi watched from a quiet booth in the Willard lobby, a single earpiece feeding her the morning pundit carousel, while Eleanor summarized numbers on a tablet. Small dollar donations from retirees in the heartland were cresting 6 figures per hour. One note read, "Finally someone's fighting back for us grandmas." Bondi acknowledged with a tight nod, but kept her victory dance internal. Civil trials were marathons, not sprints. She turned to Cross, who slid across a deposition calendar. The judge had approved overnight defendants' oral testimony set for 2 weeks hence, all document production due in 5 business days. That meant every hothead Slack joke, every draft tweet, every unsent memo living in a cloud folder now belonged to the court record. Bondi exhaled. "They'll scramble for a protective order," she said. Cross smiled thinly. "They'll try." Across the hill, AOC's war room was no longer a war room. It was an ER with a single overworked nurse. Marcus was gone fired after an ugly shouting match that ended with him lobbing a resignation letter like a grenade. Carmen looked ready to follow. Layla, eyes ringed with exhaustion, clicked through social metrics that read like a heart monitor in ventricular fibrillation. The Post had phoned for comment on Exhibit 15, though the document remained sealed. Clearly, someone inside the clerk's office was whispering. Worse, Politico obtained an internal House memorandum indicating the Ethics Committee would open a formal inquiry by week's end. Behind closed doors, leadership drafted contingency plans to strip AOC of her Energy Subcommittee seat if the inquiry advanced. Donors were already redirecting funds to safer progressive faces in California and Michigan. The Congresswoman scanned her sparse staff and felt for the first time isolation seep into her bones. Pride had been fuel, now it was ballast. At 10:30, Tessa sat in a conference room at a secure disclosure non-profit signing paperwork that granted her whistleblower status under Dodd-Frank's anti-retaliation provisions. She felt equal measures of relief and terror. Mariner assured her that Bondi's counsel would keep her identity sealed until the moment testimony became unavoidable. Still, headlines could expose her any hour. She recalled late-night laughter in the office camaraderie forged on big dreams, and wondered if she'd just burned every bridge she'd built in politics. A legal liaison slid across a burner phone protocol for protected witnesses, and Tessa tucked it into her purse like a live coal. By lunchtime, the Hill buzzed with rumours that Bondi's amended filing contained not only the playbook spreadsheet, but also audio clips recorded in AOC's own voice, strategizing how to ratchet pressure until she cries, "Uncle." Reporters couldn't confirm, but the scent of blood was enough. Questions at the daily press gaggle sharpened to scalpels. AOC tried to pivot to climate policy, yet every microphone bent back to the lawsuit. Her response, "I will not litigate sealed documents in public," failed to stem the feeding frenzy. Social feeds filled with side-by-side clips, Bondi's calm interviews juxtaposed with AOC's curt hallway retorts. For swing voters, age 40+, the contrast felt like black and white film, one figure steady the other, fidgeting beneath fluorescent lights. Mid-afternoon in a mahogany-panelled mediation suite near Farragut Square, an emissary from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee floated a trial balloon to Bondi's team. Would the former Florida AG entertain settlement discussions north of $20 million strictly confidential no admission of guilt, cross-rejected before Bondi even spoke? The emissary muttered doom about reputational mutually assured destruction. Bondi replied politely that truth was not for sale, then excused herself to prepare for a Zoom conference with refinery workers in Louisiana, who now saw her as the woman standing between them and reputational ruin. When the elevator doors closed, Cross whispered, "They're panicking." Bondi smoothed an invisible wrinkle in her jacket. And panic makes mistakes. As rush hour clogged the Beltway, a clerk delivered an emergency motion to the judge. AOC's lead trial counsel, Marisa Vega, petitioned to withdraw, citing irreconcilable ethical conflicts. Court rules demanded a formal hearing at 9 a.m. next day. Legal bloggers erupted, abrupt counsel withdrawal signals, catastrophic internal discord. Carmen broke the news to AOC in a hushed tone. The Congresswoman's reply was a whisper. "Find me another lawyer. Any lawyer." But white shoe firms don't board sinking ships mid-storm, not when sealed exhibits threaten career-ending fallout. Phones rang, voicemails stacked, but by sunset, not a single replacement had agreed to sign on. Bondi learned of the withdrawal while pacing her apartment balcony overlooking the river dusk, painting the water brass and violet. She closed her eyes, letting the humid breeze carry away fatigue. The case still had miles to travel, but momentum now ran downhill in her favor. Inside her phone chimed "Cross again. Judge just advanced status conference to tomorrow, 1 p.m., possible unseal." Bondi stared at the glowing screen, heartbeat steady. Tomorrow the curtain might lift, and the public could see every ugly line of the spreadsheet, every audio snippet, every deliberate plan to ruin. She slid the phone into her blazer, whispered a prayer for courage, and stepped back inside, knowing that the next 24 hours would decide whether American politics learned a lesson or devoured another cautionary tale. Across the river, AOC sat alone in her dim office, stacks of subpoenas fanned across the desk like tarot cards. She dialed a number she had sworn never to use, a crisis communications veteran who specialized in fallen CEOs. The call rang twice, then connected. She drew a breath to speak, but before a single word left her lips, a knock sounded at the door, sharp and insistent, as though fate itself demanded entry. And in that frozen instant, Segment 6 ends the handle, turning Revelation a heartbeat away. The knock hammered again, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez snapped upright, phone still to her ear. A third rap, sharper, shoved adrenaline through her like a cattle prod. She swung the door open and found Carmen, cheeks flushed, raincoat dripping. In her hand lay a stiff white envelope stamped United States District Court. Carmen's voice was ragged. "Marisa Vega just filed her withdrawal motion. Judge set the hearing for 9. You have to appear in person." AOC pressed the envelope against her chest, the paper suddenly heavier than lead. On the phone, the crisis comms veteran repeated hello, but she ended the call without a word. 45 minutes later, a black sedan fishtailed through puddles toward Vega's K Street office. The congresswoman refused to arrive hat in hand, yet she needed to know why her counsel was abandoning ship. Security waved her up, and Vega met her in a glass conference room. No handshake, no small talk. The lawyer's eyes were rimmed with sleepless crimson. "Your staff's documents show coaching witnesses to embellish," Vega said. "If I stay, I risk disbarment." She slid a thumb drive across the table. "Discovery will surface this anyway. You should hear it now." AOC plugged it into her laptop. Up came an audio clip, her own voice weeks earlier, instructing Carmen to turn up the stink so Bondi has to settle. Hearing herself speak the words felt like swallowing ground glass. She ejected the drive, handed it back. "You can't testify," Vega warned. "Cross-examination would gut you." AOC's reply was a whisper. "I don't have a choice." By dawn of the hearing, the corridor outside courtroom 14 was a press gauntlet. Photographers jockeyed for angles as Bondi stepped from an elevator, cross at her side. She wore navy again, cool, unflappable. Reporters barked questions about the sealed exhibit. She offered the same disciplined line. "Truth is patient. We'll let the court speak." Moments later, AOC emerged from the opposite bank of elevators alone. Suit's slightly rumpled eyes shadowed. Microphones pounced. "Congresswoman, has your lawyer quit?" She kept walking, lips pressed, but the cameras captured a tremor in her jaw. Inside, the judge wasted no time. Vega repeated her motion to withdraw, citing ethical conflict. The judge turned to AOC. "Do you oppose counsel's request?" She swallowed. "Your Honor, I object. I need representation." The judge's gaze chilled. "Ms. Vega states continued service would violate Rule 1.16. I grant withdrawal." Gavel struck. Vega gathered her briefcase, avoided AOC's stare, and was gone. Cross rose. "Your Honor, with counsel gone and discovery deadlines looming, plaintiff moves to unseal Exhibit 15 for the sake of transparency." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned back. "Congresswoman, do you have new counsel prepared to argue against unsealing silence pooled?" She could almost feel the national audience waiting behind every camera lens. The judge's voice cut the hush. "Absent objection, the sealed materials become public at 1 p.m. Bondi's camp remained stone-faced. The floor clock read 9:27. Less than 4 hours until every line of that spreadsheet, every internal audio clip would splash across the country. Court adjourned. Hallway chaos erupted, but Bondi slipped down a side stairwell to a quiet conference niche. Cross phoned Eleanor, unsealing at 1300 confirm press packet. Bondi looked out a narrow window where storm clouds parted over the mall. She allowed herself a single breath of vindication, then turned to the work ahead: jury selection protocols, deposition, outlines, media cadence. Across town, AOC sat in the backseat of a Lyft Carmen, beside her both scrolling frantic contact lists for any attorney willing to enter an inferno on 2 hours' notice. No one bit. Big law avoided political napalm. Boutique crusaders feared losing future clients to the Bondi precedent. Carmen's screen finally flashed maybe a solo practitioner, fresh from a whistleblower win reputation for last-stand defenses. They rerouted to Adams Morgan. Inside the cramped row house office, the lawyer, a sandy-haired 50-something named Dale Mercer, listened as AOC laid out her predicament in clipped phrases. He tapped a legal pad, eyes unreadable. "We can move to delay the unseal on privilege grounds," he said. "But courts dislike 11th-hour stunts. Better play is damage containment. Apology. Settlement." AOC's spine stiffened. "I will not grovel." Mercer sighed. "Then brace." He slid over a retainer agreement. She signed. Options had evaporated. Carmen checked the clock, 11:42. Back at the courthouse, a clerk wheeled a cart stacked with brown envelopes stamped "Unsealed by order of court." Reporters queued like shoppers on Black Friday, elbowing for copies. At exactly 1:03 p.m., Politico hit publish spreadsheet shows AOC team planned pressure campaign regardless of truth. Minutes later, Fox blasted a Chiron CNN followed with a push alert. Even NPR broke its measured tone to label the document explosive. Lines from the audio files surfaced on Twitter, AOC's voice calling Bondi a paper tiger if you shred her first. Dow Jones dipped 42 points on political jitters. Conservative talk radio blew open phone lines all afternoon as callers demanded formal censure. Bondi's communications plan rolled out like an artillery timetable statement at 1:15, emphasizing sad necessity. Long-form op-ed emailed to editorial boards by 2 live hits at 3 and 5, highlighting facts over fury. Ratings soared. Older voters nodded their belief in due process, unexpectedly renewed by a woman they barely knew a year ago. Meanwhile, inside a dimmed office on the Hill, AOC faced a bleak landscape, an ethics probe, inevitable donors, vanishing staff either gone or lawyering up. Mercer placed a stack of fresh subpoenas on her desk. "First deposition is yours," he said. "Friday 9 a.m. They'll put you under oath." She lifted the papers with numb fingers, heart hammering against ribs. Outside, protesters gathered, some in solidarity, some demanding resignation, voices echoing up the facades like distant surf. She wondered if tomorrow's deposition might strip the last thread of legacy she'd fought to weave. At 6 p.m., Bondi exited a studio near the White House. Last interview of the day wrapped. Night air smelled of rain-washed magnolia. Cross read a final update: conservative PACs had raised more in 48 hours than during the entire previous quarter. Bondi nodded, but cautioned him. "Momentum tempts arrogance. We stay disciplined." Cross agreed, though a small grin betrayed relief. Across the city, lights flicked on in AOC's apartment. She stood before a mirror, rehearsing answers, voice hoarse, eyes rimmed red. Carmen brewed coffee, silent. The congresswoman's phone buzzed, a single text from an unknown number reading only, "Friday will be the end." She locked the screen, pulse pounding, unsure whether the message was threat or truth. The room felt airless. She swallowed, turned back to the mirror, and began again, line after line, searching for words sturdy enough to survive the coming crucible, while a restless city settled into uneasy darkness, waiting for the dawn that would deliver either redemption or ruin. Rain hammered the capital the night before the deposition, sheets of water, flattening sirens into a distant hum, while the city braced for spectacle. In a windowless suite on K Street, Pam Bondi's team ran a final tabletop drill. Cross-firing rapid-fire questions, just cruel enough to mirror what he'd unleash on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come morning. Bondi fielded each hypothetical with surgical calm, one hand, cradling a mug of black coffee gone lukewarm. Elena monitored social chatter on a laptop beside her. Every focus group dial showed older independents sliding further into Bondi's column after the spreadsheet fiasco. Yet Bondi warned against triumphalism. "Depositions aren't TV," she said. "One overreach, and the jury senses bloodlust." Cross agreed, shuffling annotated binders labelled playbook, audio, ethics. They would start soft ask about Met Gala comp tickets, let AOC volunteer context, then tighten the vice with the true or not thread and the ratchet pressure audio. If the congresswoman hedged, they'd press on coaching witnesses. If she pled ignorance, Exhibit 15 would contradict her line for line. Bondi closed her notes, looked Cross in the eye. No gloat, no snark. Let the record indict. Cross nodded. The plan was set. Across town in a cramped apartment, AOC paced between couch and kitchenette, while Dale Mercer rehearsed defensive posture. He advised short answers, no editorializing, no stray sarcasm. Every syllable under oath could be spliced into trial impeachment. Carmen sat nearby, pale, tracking local news banners predicting career-ending testimony. Mercer handed AOC a slim binder of stipulated facts, flagged the lines where truth could not be massaged. "Admit what's documented," he said. "Deny intent. Stress good faith policy debate." AOC bit her lip. "That spreadsheet, they'll paint it as malice," Mercer replied. "It is malice if you own it. Distance yourself." But distance required sacrifice. Several bullet points were Carmen's words, others Marcus's, yet some highlighted in neon bore AOC's initials. Thunder rattled the window panes. The Congresswoman felt the gavel already a phantom echo beneath her ribs, but pride that old iron rod held her spine straight. She closed the binder with a snap. "I'll tell the truth, but I won't beg." Mercer exhaled. Truth without contrition could read as arrogance, but clients chose the hill they died on. Sun crawled over the Potomac like a dull blade at 6:12 a.m. Mist rising off the river, and the deposition suite in the federal courthouse glowed under harsh fluorescent panels. Court reporter tested microphones. Paralegals stacked bottled water beside plaques instructing, "Speak clearly." Bondi arrived First Navy again, no entourage save Cross, and a junior associate tasked with timestamps. She placed a single photograph of her family on the table, silent reminder to herself why the fight mattered, then reviewed the question tree one last time. At 8:52, AOC stepped through the threshold with Mercer hair pulled into a functional bun navy suit too, but ill-pressed, lending her an unguarded humanity cameras rarely caught. Eyes met across the oak table. No handshake. The videographer called the deposition to order at exactly 9:03. Stipulations read, "Swear-in administered timestamp rolling." Cross led with preliminaries name office responsibilities, then drifted into soft territory public statements on fossil fuel lobbying. AOC answered evenly, voice steady. Cross pivoted to the Met Gala report quoting the Office of Congressional Ethics vote. She framed it as transparency said invoices were being paid. Cross let the answer hang, jotted a note, then slid Exhibit 4, the internal spreadsheet, into view. "Congresswoman, is this document familiar?" Mercer objected to authenticity. Cross produced the chain of custody affidavit signed by Tessa. Objection withdrawn. AOC scanned the sheet. Her signature block, ghosted from cell A42, glared back. Cross asked whether the phrase "amplify any personal dirt" verified or not reflected her directive. AOC swallowed. Those were brainstorming notes from staff, not a directive. Cross flipped to audio transcript page, her own voice saying, "Ratchet pressure," until she cries, "Uncle." Silence thickened. The court reporter's keys tapped like sleet on tin. Mercer advised a brief recess, but AOC shook her head, refusing the lifeline. She clarified context-heated strategy, no intent to defame. Cross nodded as if sympathetic, then pressed. "So when your staff tweeted Bondi colludes with big oil criminals, did you verify the claim?" AOC's lips parted, no sound. Outside the suite, the hallway filled with reporters awaiting leaks, but inside, only the low hum of climate control marked time. 30 minutes later, Cross unveiled the final exhibit, a WhatsApp chat log showing directives to seed rumors about Trump Foundation payoff, despite public records clearing Bondi years earlier. AOC's shoulders sagged. She tried to recalibrate, claiming she never saw the log. Cross asked, "Would it surprise you that your digital forensics tag places this message on your personal phone at 21:17 April 5th? Mercer objected to foundation, but damage already sparked. AOC's pulse pounded in her ears. The camera lens seemed to dilate. Cross leaned back, voice gentle. "Congresswoman, were you ever concerned that repeating unverified corruption claims could harm someone innocent?" The question, simple and human, gnawed worse than legal jargon. She searched for an answer palatable to conscience and optics and found none. The reporter's keys recorded her pause 4 seconds, an eternity in litigation. Finally, "Yes. I was concerned." Cross offered no smile, only a curt nod to the videographer. "No further questions for now." Mercer led rehabilitation, but every answer bled credibility. The earlier admission crippled his narrative. At noon, the deposition adjourned. Reporters lunged as doors opened, but the bailiff blocked them. Bondi walked past microphones, gaze forward, silent, a victor who knew noise could only spoil the verdict. AOC exited another door, but a freelance cameraman caught her profile, eyes, glassy shoulders bowed. Within minutes, Getty Images labeled the shot, "Embattled Congresswoman leaves deposition." Twitter turned it into a symbol some saw humility at last, others smelled defeat. Back in Bondi's command center, Cross drafted a summary to send conservative outlets careful to quote only on-record lines. Elena booked evening slots. She'd paint Bondi not as conqueror, but as cautionary tale words have weight. Meanwhile, Mercer told AOC not to watch TV, but screens flickered everywhere in elevators, taxis, phone push alerts. Each headline felt like a hammer driving the nail. Late afternoon, she sat alone in her office, city lights blinking on, remembering her first campaign where truth felt clear, enemies distant. Now truth was deposition transcripts and chain of custody hashes, and each heartbeat drumming the cost of pride. A knock broke her reverie. Layla stood holding an envelope stamped House Ethics Committee. Inside, official notice of investigation and a date for closed-door testimony. AOC closed her eyes. The arena she once owned had morphed into layered tribunals with no friendly juries. Outside, thunderheads gathered again over the district, and somewhere in that rolling sky, a decision brewed whether the coming storm would wash mistakes clean or drag her under for good, leaving the nation to wonder how a single spreadsheet became the hinge on which a movement swung. Friday's deposition transcript hit the clerk's queue by sunrise Saturday, and by noon, cable networks were rolling the juiciest exchanges as on-screen chyrons. Cross's soft-spoken line, "Were you ever concerned repeating unverified allegations could harm someone innocent?" landed like a Sunday school lesson America didn't know it needed. Focus group dials in Cleveland and Tampa spiked green for Bondi each time that clip aired, while independent voters watching AOC's 4-second pause turned their knobs flatline. Deep in the Democratic analytics bunker, strategists watched real-time dashboards hemorrhage suburban support. One data scientist muttered that the numbers looked like the night of the first debate in 1980, only in reverse, and closed his laptop, unwilling to quantify further collapse. AOC, meanwhile, spent the weekend locked in her apartment blinds, drawn rehearsing talking points for Monday's House Ethics interview, though every draft apology died on her tongue. Dale Mercer argued for a public statement expressing regret, but the Congresswoman's pride still smoldering from Cross's question held fast. She would not feed what she called the right-wing bonfire. Carmen, who hadn't slept in 48 hours, scrolled Twitter for sympathetic voices and found only a shrinking chorus drowned out by truck stop DJs and Midwestern pastors praising Bondi's steadiness. Even progressive podcasts, once her echo chamber, shifted to panel discussions about the perils of confirmation bias, gently elbowing her under the bus to preserve the movement's brand. Sunday evening brought a new fracture. Tessa, the whistleblower, received an unmarked envelope slid beneath her apartment door, a single printout of her own HR file, and a photo of her parents' house in Indiana captioned, "Nice farm shame, if activism ruined it." She forwarded images to Mariner, who contacted Bondi's team. Cross fired off an emergency motion seeking protective order for material witnesses, CCing the U.S. attorney. The judge scheduled a status call for 8 a.m. Monday. News of the intimidation attempt leaked within hours. Bondi condemned it instantly. No fight for truth justifies threats, while AOC's office released a 10-word statement disavowing harassment. Yet voters noticed which camp acted first. Overnight in-trade odds on Bondi winning outright soared above 70%. Donors aged 50-plus flooded her legal defense pack, with $20 checks notes penned in quavering cursive "Stand tall for the rest of us." Elena crafted a thank you blast, but kept the tone pastorally calm. Victory laps risked backlash. Monday dawned with sirens. U.S. Marshals escorted Tessa to court for the sealed hearing. Camera shutters snapped her pale face, triggering sympathetic coverage that undercut any remaining narrative portraying Bondi as bully. Inside, the judge granted the protective order and hinted he'd consider sanctions if further intimidation surfaced. Outside, reporters fed the story into a nation already primed to see AOC's orbit as unethical. Back on the Hill, the Ethics Committee convened behind frosted glass. Senior members, conscious of their own re-election optics, asked blunt questions. Did AOC authorize the regardless of truth wording? Was campaign money routed for personal styling at the gala? Did staff coordinate with outside agitators to harass Bondi's family? The Congresswoman, flanked by Mercer, leaned on legislative privilege where she could. Elsewhere, she invoked strategic communications misunderstandings. But committee counsel produced WhatsApp screenshots and invoice chains that tightened like nooses. When the chair finally adjourned, AOC exited a side corridor, pulse hammering so loud she barely registered the reporters corralled by Capitol Police. Carmen texted leadership pulling support on tomorrow's climate bill. They don't want your name on it. The movement she'd midwifed on authenticity now treated her like a quarantine case. Tuesday afternoon, Cross filed a motion for partial summary judgment on liability, arguing the deposition admissions and documentary record met the Supreme Court's actual malice bar as a matter of law. Legal analysts on every network conceded it was a credible shot. One liberal commentator whispered off mic, she might actually get it. Bondi, reading the brief in her apartment, felt a tug of unease. A win on paper could still be overturned on appeal, and public opinion could boomerang if she looked vindictive. She called Cross, insisted the damages section remain unchanged, 80 million 0 cents, to remind viewers the suit was never about enrichment. That night she recorded a short video for local affiliates, no boasts, just a clear reminder that reckless speech hurts real families. Older voters heard their own stories in her cadence. Pundits predicted a Senate run. Bondi smiled politely and deflected, yet the prospect lingered like distant drums. Wednesday brought thunder again, literal and political. AOC's remaining staff, 3 interns, and Layla received subpoenas for deposition slots next week. One intern quit on the spot. Layla stayed, loyalty welded to admiration turned pity. She found AOC staring out a rain-streaked window, palms flat on the sill. "You could still settle," Layla whispered. The Congresswoman's eyes were red but dry. "If I settle, I validate their playbook," she said. "Truth matters." Layla fought the urge to remind her that truth, legally speaking, was already pinned to the spreadsheet and audio. Instead, she asked if AOC wanted dinner. The answer was silence. That same evening, Bondi attended a closed-door prep session with a jury consulting firm. Charts projected on a screen showed mock jurors, retirees, small business owners, 2 union Democrats rating her credibility at 8.7 of 10 and AOC's at 3.1. Yet the facilitator warned overconfidence alienates swing jurors. They want humility in victory. Bondi took notes. Before leaving, she lingered alone in the parking lot, rain dripping from the garage roof, and whispered a prayer that justice would land without crushing her adversary's soul. Then she climbed into a waiting sedan, unaware a dark SUV idled 2 levels below its occupants, photographing her plates, images later posted on a fringe forum, claiming Bondi's suit was a deep state op. Cross's phone pinged with the link. He forwarded it to the marshals. The circle of menace had widened, and both camps now walked under threat. Thursday morning, the judge denied AOC's emergency motion to delay further discovery, calling it dilatory. He set trial for 39 days out and hinted that a liability ruling could come sooner. Panic rippled through progressive leadership. Private Zooms buzzed with talk of urging resignation to stem damage. Late that night, AOC's personal phone vibrated, an unknown number, again a single text, tick. She blocked it, then deleted half-written resignation drafts from her laptop. Across the river, Bondi closed a leather binder labelled Opening Statement, rehearsing lines about integrity and restraint. At 11:57 p.m., her phone lit up with a number traced to Tallahassee. A voice warned her to drop the suit or see files surface about your family. Bondi listened, recorded and forwarded the audio to Cross, who in turn emailed the judge. He typed only 3 words, pattern of threats. The send receipt blinked at 12:04 a.m. In the silence that followed, thunder rolled once more over Washington, and 2 women, one resolute, one cornered, lay awake knowing dawn would haul them closer to a verdict neither the courtroom nor the country could escape. The next sunrise felt metallic, the kind of hard glare that polishes every crack in the city's marble facades. At 7 a.m., Judge Harlan's clerk filed a terse minute order. Oral argument on plaintiff's motion for partial summary judgment set for Friday 10:00 a.m. Each side allotted 30 minutes, ruling to follow from the bench. Cable shows erupted, no jury, no drawn-out testimony, just the law laid bare before lunchtime. At Bondi headquarters, Cross laid out the plan with military precision. Open by rereading AOC's 4-second silence, stitch it to the regardless of truth spreadsheet line, then drive home the WhatsApp chat and prior ethics reports to prove a pattern of reckless disregard. Bondi listened, nodding, but insisted he end with a reminder that the case was about restoring boundaries, not crushing a rival. Older voters prized mercy nearly as much as justice. Meanwhile, Dale Mercer met AOC in a basement hearing room beneath Rayburn, the fluorescents buzzing like angry hornets. She looked smaller than her posters, hair-loose eyes ringed and stark. Mercer handed over a memo. Leadership would introduce a private resolution asking her to reconsider public service. If the judge granted summary judgment, they're ready to sacrifice you, he said. She scanned the page. A handwritten note from a veteran colleague read, "Take the exit, save the cause." Her jaw tightened. Pride was now less iron rod, more glass shard, but it still cut. She asked whether any precedent existed for defeating a post-summary damages phase on appeal. Mercer muttered about Sullivan's standard rarity cost. AOC pressed a palm to her temple. Then we fight. By noon, a new tremor shook the story, a leak of internal GOP polling, showing Bondi's favorables eclipsing several sitting senators. Commentators floated a 2026 Senate run. Hedge fund donors rang Elena asking how to help. Bondi demurred publicly, but in private she felt the undertow. Politics tempts even the wary. Cross warned her, if victory feels destined, humility must be visible. She agreed, recording a Sunday church-length message for her email list. No gloating, just gratitude and a promise that should she win, she'd donate any damages to the last 0 cent to a Victims of Defamation fund. The gesture lit up talk radio like fireworks. Callers wept on air, host after host, praising a lawsuit that might actually heal something. Across the hill, AOC's world contracted further. Layla Final Aid Standing received her own deposition notice. She found the congresswoman pacing the office's length of carpet, worn thin by sleepless nights. "They're coming for me too," Layla whispered. AOC touched her arm. "I'm sorry. I never meant words failed. Intent no longer mattered." Outside, protesters ringed the building, some waving "Quit Lying" placards, others holding cardboard hearts reading "We Believe." The chant lines blended into a confused dirge. Carmen, now remote, texted a link. A former progressive ally had penned an op-ed titled "When Zeal Becomes Zealous." The movement's intellectual class was stepping back, abstracting her downfall into a cautionary think piece. Isolation became physical. Elevator riders exited at other floors when she stepped in. She told herself martyrs walked alone, yet the loneliness tasted like pennies on her tongue. That night, the marshal's detail added an extra cruiser outside Bondi's condo after another voicemail threatened her niece. Bondi sat at the kitchen table, Bible-open penning notes for court citations to New York Times versus Sullivan language about breathing space, but also a line Solomon Strait speech "Divorce from truth invites tyranny." She rehearsed it until the meter felt inevitable. Nearby, her cell buzzed with a final settlement feeler from a Beltway fixer. 10 million public joint statement of mutual misunderstandings, non-disclosure forever. She stared at the numbers. 10 million could fund scholarships, veteran clinics. 80 million would likely shrink on appeal. She pictured the welder in Louisiana who'd grabbed her hand and said, "You're fighting for the rest of us." She deleted the message unanswered. Thursday bled into pre-dawn Friday. In a stale hotel conference room, Mercer drilled AOC again, short answers, no anger, defer to counsel. She barely heard him. Headlines flashed inside her skull like strobe lights. She asked if Bondi might accept a heartfelt apology in open court. Mercer said perhaps if sincerity convinced the judge, the case didn't warrant punitive numbers. But sincerity demanded relinquishing the narrative she'd defended for months. 4 hours later, they entered the courthouse by separate entrances. Security wanded bags bristling with binders. Reporters filled overflow rooms. At 9:57, Bondi adjusted her jacket, breathed Psalm 27 under her breath. At 9:58, AOC smoothed a curl behind her ear palms, damp. Judge Harlan strode in at 10 sharp robe flaring like a crow's wing. "Counsel, are we ready?" Cross rose, voice calm steel. "Plaintiff is ready, Your Honor." Mercer followed, throat-tight, defense stands ready. The judge signaled Cross to begin. He stepped to the lectern, laid down one sheet of paper, and addressed a courtroom so still the HVAC hum sounded like surf. "Your Honor, the record speaks for itself." Outside, a bank of satellite trucks hummed their antennas aimed skyward, poised to beam whatever came next into 1,000 living rooms, and in that charged silence, Section 10 ends the first syllable, hanging like a match above tinder. And when a public figure instructs her team to amplify any personal dirt, verified or not, the Constitution's shield becomes a sword. Sullivan protects zealous debate, not calculated defamation. Cross's voice never rose, yet carried to the back row, each syllable landing like a crisp gavel tap. He held the lectern with one hand, the other tucked behind his back, projecting a confidence that felt less like theatre and more like inevitability. He walked the judge through the chain, the leaked chat logs, the spreadsheet, the deposition admission that concerns existed, yet the accusations went live anyway. He cited St. Amant versus Thompson Hart Hanks versus Connaughton case after case, where reckless disregard pierced the First Amendment veil. He finished with a single sentence: "Truth is no less free because it is disciplined." Then he stepped away, leaving the words suspended in the hush. Mercer rose, straightening cuffs that suddenly felt too tight. He began by invoking New York Times versus Sullivan's warning against self-censorship, painting AOC as a passionate policymaker whose language, however sharp, aimed at issues of deepest public concern. He argued that brainstorming documents should not be equated with final intent, that deposition pauses were human, not malicious, that political speech deserves breathing space, especially when challenging entrenched power. Yet as he spoke, the judge's pen scarcely moved. Mercer felt time dribble away. He pivoted to the Met Gala matter, claiming ongoing reimbursement showed good faith, but Cross's earlier slide 5-0 OCE vote for further inquiry echoed in every mind. With 2 minutes left, Mercer tried a last angle, the chilling effect on future dissent if a single misjudgment led to ruinous damages. He concluded, voice thinning, "Democracy demands latitude for earnest error, Your Honor." Judge Harlan leaned back, weathered hands steepled beneath a jaw as lined as a topo map. He thanked counsel, scanned the packed courtroom, and spoke without theatrics. He praised robust debate, noted Sullivan's high bar, then quoted its admonition: "Calculated falsehood falls outside the privilege." He ticked through the evidence, explicit instructions to disseminate unverified claims, the Congresswoman's own recorded words, subsequent threats to the plaintiff's family. He paused, letting that gravity settle. Then, the record shows no genuine dispute of material fact on the element of actual malice. Summary judgment on liability is therefore granted to the plaintiff. A collective gasp fluttered through reporters. A pen clattered to the floor. Harlan continued damages would be tried to a jury unless parties stipulated. Discovery on financial harm would proceed on an accelerated calendar. Counsel to confer within 48 hours. Gavel down. 10:34 a.m. Cross exhaled, shoulders loosening for the first time in months. Bondi squeezed his arm, but kept her face composed. Mercer sat motionless, eyes on the table, while AOC stared straight ahead, lashes blinking fast, yet unshed. Court security ushered them into separate corridors. Outside, the marble steps exploded in flashbulbs. Fox cut in live Bondi wins landmark ruling. CNN bannered liability, found damages next. MSNBC managed progressive icon faces jury on damages. Social feeds convulsed. Older voters cheered Gen Z meme pages, churned gallows humor, and donors dialed like slot machines, one side in euphoria, the other in triage. Back inside a holding room, Bondi fielded Cross's recap trial, now limited to numbers actual malice established standard for punitive wide open. Elena reported that hedge fund overtures tripled within minutes, but Bondi waved it off. "We finish with integrity," she said. "No greed." She drafted a 140-word statement, thanking the court, urging calm, and reiterating her pledge to seed any award into a defamation relief fund. Cross advised, adding a line disavowing threats to witnesses. She already had. In a dim hallway, Mercer briefed AOC options were lean. She could appeal after final judgment, seek a settlement before the damages phase, or ride the next 6 weeks under the microscope of asset subpoenas. He mentioned Chapter 11 as a theoretical shield if the numbers dwarfed her net worth. The Congresswoman's cheeks blanched, but her voice remained level. "If I fold now," she said, "they rewrite the line between criticism and crime forever." Mercer reminded her the line was already rewritten by the ruling. The question now was how deep the carving would go. She dismissed him to fetch the car. By mid-afternoon, House leadership convened an emergency caucus. Pollsters presented slides showing a 5-point national swing among seniors since the ruling, a drop in small-dollar fundraising and unfavourable headline risk threatening frontline races. A motion circulated request that Representative Ocasio-Cortez temporarily relinquish committee assignments pending resolution. Several members balked, fearing backlash from the left, but the whip's nose count suggested a near lock. The Speaker gave AOC until Monday to decide, voluntarily hinting that a floor vote would not be kind. The Congresswoman left the chamber to a gauntlet of reporters. She said nothing, but the silence now read, not as resolve but vacancy, a leader hollowed out in public real time. Evening fell with a strange hush. The market steadied talk. Radio turned reflective, and families at dinner debated whether the case marked a return to civility or a harbinger of litigation wars. In Florida, Pam Bondi walked the shoreline beneath a salmon dusk, shoes in hand, contemplating the razor's edge between vindication and vengeance. Up north, AOC sat alone on her living room floor, surrounded by unpaid legal invoices, her phone vibrating with messages from once staunch allies who no longer spoke of solidarity but survival. She opened a blank notes app, typed resignation draft at the top, stared, then closed it unread. At 11:59 p.m., Cross emailed Mercer formal offer settle for $1 in nominal damages, plus a joint statement acknowledging the statements were unverified and apologizing for harm. Bondi would waive all fees. Deadline Sunday midnight. Attached a simple sentence. Some victories must heal to remain victories. The message landed in Mercer's inbox as AOC finally drifted into fitful sleep, unaware of the lifeline blinking in blue. Sunday would dawn in 30 minutes, and with it the possibility that pride might yield to contrition, or that refusal would march them both into a jury chamber ready to price an unmeasurable wound. Sunday sunlight edged across the Capitol in muted gold, while church bells tolled a deliberate cadence, as though the city itself offered counsel on penance. In her apartment, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez woke to the dull ache of half-remembered dread, thumbed her phone, and found Cross's midnight email glowing like a question from Providence. $1 in damages, mutual statement apology. For unverified claims, all fees waived, a settlement so merciful it felt unreal. The offer's final line, "Some victories must heal," echoed everything her conscience had whispered during sleepless weeks, yet pride wounded and raw recoiled. She forwarded the email to Mercer, and Carmen typed thoughts, then set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling where hairline cracks mapped a future neither martyr nor victor, just humbled public servant. Across town, Pam Bondi knelt in a pew at St. Matthew's, the hush broken only by organ prelude, and prayed that the woman she had sued would choose reconciliation. The lawsuit had never been about dollars. It was about stopping a contagion of casual maligning before it stained the Republic beyond repair. After Mass, she stepped onto Rhode Island Avenue, checked her watch 10 hours until the deadline, and felt a surprising flutter of anxiety. If AOC rejected the lifeline, the trial would turn from necessary correction to spectacle, and spectators often confuse justice with entertainment. Back on the Hill, Mercer convened a video call, his square, Carmen's weary face from a coffee shop, Layla in a dim bedroom, turned war post, and AOC wrapped in a blanket gripping a mug that had long gone cold. Mercer laid out reality. The judge's liability ruling meant a jury could award figures that dwarfed her assets. Bankruptcy could protect personal property, but not the legacy she claimed to defend, and an appeal might take years while damages hung like an anchor. Carmen argued the movement could absorb an apology, if framed as a lesson in accountability. "You modeled transparency day one." Alex, Living that value now could salvage the cause. Layla added softly that volunteers back home were being harassed and an apology might staunch the bleeding. AOC listened, eyes fixed on a crack in the mug glaze, but the word sorry throbbed like a bruise. She feared it would read as capitulation to the very forces she'd battled since bartending days. She asked Mercer what a joint statement would look like. He sketched language, acknowledged statements were not adequately verified, express regret for harm, reaffirm commitment to vigorous but honest debate. No gag order, no admission of ideological defeat. Just truth. Noon brought new pressure. The Speaker's Chief of Staff called leadership would move ahead with a committee strip vote if she hadn't signalled settlement by Monday morning. Polling showed suburban independents siding with Bondi 2-1. Donors were earmarking environmental funds to less polarising champions. AOC thanked him, voice steady, hung up, and watched pedestrians drift along the sidewalk below tourists, unaware that a national fault line ran through the woman at the window. Carmen pinged that progressive radio hosts were split. Some urged her to apologise and pivot. Others demanded resistance to lawfare. Hashtags flickered, but never took. The energy that once lifted her had diffused. At 3 p.m, Bondi's condo buzzed with cautious optimism. Cross-rehearsed media lines for either outcome. Eleanor drafted 2 press releases, settlement achieved, path to healing, and proceeding to damages seeking closure. Bondi paced uneasy. She remembered Cross's advice about humility. She had offered the out now, it was in her adversary's hands. Across the river, AOC finally opened a blank document and typed a first sentence. In the heat of political battle, I failed to meet the standard I expect of myself. She paused, deleted, tried again. Even leaders must own missteps. Again, delete. Each keystroke felt like carving away armour. She stepped onto her balcony, rain-clean air, carrying faint sirens, and wondered whether history rewarded stubbornness or grace. 6 p.m. ticked past. Mercer texted Bondi's number, acknowledging receipt of the offer, promising a decision. He returned to AOC's living room, found her seated at the laptop. On-screen words had taken shape, an apology plain and unadorned, no hedging about intent. She asked, "If I release this, do they win?" Mercer answered, "If you mean polls, maybe. If you mean the country learning something, we all win." She imagined reading the statement aloud to the welder in Louisiana, to the Bronx teenager who tattooed her campaign logo, to her mother who still clipped every headline, good or bad. The taste of pride soured. She hit save but not send. There was one more voice, her own inner narrator, still unconvinced. Dusk settled purple over the Potomac. Bondi stood at her window, watching headlights spool across the bridge, phone in hand, deadline creeping. Cross suggested they extend 24 hours, show magnanimity, but she shook her head. Justice deferred too long invited cynicism. At 10:47 p.m, Mercer emailed a single-line subject request for minor edit statement attached. Bondi opened the draft. The apology remained intact, dollars unchanged, but AOC added a final paragraph pledging to introduce bipartisan legislation on social media transparency, co-sponsored, if Bondi would help craft it. Cross read over her shoulder, whispered, "That's legacy." Bondi's chest tightened. This was bigger than victory. She typed, agreed, and pressed send at 11:06. 11:15, AOC refreshed her inbox, saw Bondi's assent, exhaled so sharply, Layla looked up from the couch. Mercer drafted filing paperwork to stay the damages trial. Carmen scheduled a joint press conference for noon Monday on the courthouse steps. Outside, thunder rumbled, but it sounded less like ominous drums now, more like a sky exhaling tension. Yet far from Washington, in a basement studio run by an incendiary podcaster who thrived on perpetual outrage, a different plot stirred. A former AOC aide, fired weeks earlier, clutched a hard drive labelled insurance and promised revelations too salacious for mainstream networks. The host grinned, cued a Monday morning release, designed to torch any fragile truce before it sparked. Back in DC, neither Bondi nor AOC knew the fuse had been lit anew. They slept, one in measured gratitude, the other in wary relief, unaware that dawn threatened to shatter the peace they'd forged just minutes before. Sunday sunlight edged across the Capitol in muted gold, while church bells tolled a deliberate cadence as though the city itself offered counsel on penance. In her apartment, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez woke to the dull ache of half-remembered dread, thumbed her phone, and found Cross's midnight email glowing like a question from Providence $1 in damages mutual statement apology for unverified claims. All fees waived, a settlement so merciful it felt unreal. The offer's final line, "Some victories must heal," echoed everything her conscience had whispered during sleepless weeks, yet pride wounded and raw recoiled. She forwarded the email to Mercer, and Carmen typed, "Thoughts," then set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling where hairline cracks mapped a future, neither martyr nor victor, just humbled public servant. Across town, Pam Bondi knelt in a pew at St. Matthew's, the hush broken only by organ prelude, and prayed that the woman she had sued would choose reconciliation. The lawsuit had never been about dollars. It was about stopping a contagion of casual maligning before it stained the Republic beyond repair. After Mass, she stepped onto Rhode Island Avenue, checked her watch 10 hours until the deadline, and felt a surprising flutter of anxiety. If AOC rejected the lifeline, the trial would turn from necessary correction to spectacle, and spectators often confused justice with entertainment. Back on the Hill, Mercer convened a video call, his square Carmen's weary face from a coffee shop, Layla in a dim bedroom turned warpost, and AOC wrapped in a blanket, gripping a mug that had long gone cold. Mercer laid out reality. The judge's liability ruling meant a jury could award figures that dwarfed her assets. Bankruptcy could protect personal property, but not the legacy she claimed to defend, and an appeal might take years while damages hung like an anchor. Carmen argued the movement could absorb an apology if framed as a lesson in accountability. "You modeled transparency day one, Alex. Living that value now could salvage the cause." Layla added softly that volunteers back home were being harassed and an apology might staunch the bleeding. AOC listened, eyes fixed on a crack in the mug glaze, but the word sorry throbbed like a bruise. She feared it would read as capitulation to the very forces she'd battled since bartending days. She asked Mercer what a joint statement would look like. He sketched language, acknowledged statements were not adequately verified, expressed regret for harm, reaffirmed commitment to vigorous but honest debate. No gag order, no admission of ideological defeat, just truth. Noon brought new pressure. The Speaker's Chief of Staff called leadership would move ahead with a committee strip vote if she hadn't signalled settlement by Monday morning. Polling showed suburban independents siding with Bondi 2-1. Donors were earmarking environmental funds to less polarising champions. AOC thanked him, voice steady, hung up, and watched pedestrians drift along the sidewalk below tourists, unaware that a national fault line ran through the woman at the window. Carmen pinged that progressive radio hosts were split. Some urged her to apologise and pivot, others demanded resistance to lawfare. Hashtags flickered but never took. The energy that once lifted her had diffused. At 3 p.m, Bondi's condo buzzed with cautious optimism. Cross rehearsed media lines for either outcome. Eleanor drafted 2 press releases, settlement achieved, path to healing, and proceeding to damages seeking closure. Bondi paced uneasy. She remembered Cross's advice about humility. She had offered the out, now it was in her adversary's hands. Across the river, AOC finally opened a blank document and typed a first sentence. "In the heat of political battle, I failed to meet the standard I expect of myself." She paused, deleted, tried again. Even leaders must own missteps. Again, delete. Each keystroke felt like carving away armor. She stepped onto her balcony, rain clean air, carrying faint sirens, and wondered whether history rewarded stubbornness or grace. 6 p.m. ticked past. Mercer texted Bondi's number, acknowledging receipt of the offer, promising a decision. He returned to AOC's living room, found her seated at the laptop. On screen, words had taken shape, an apology, plain and unadorned, no hedging about intent. She asked, "If I release this, do they win?" Mercer answered, "If you mean polls, maybe. If you mean the country learning something, we all win." She imagined reading the statement aloud to the welder in Louisiana, to the Bronx teenager who tattooed her campaign logo to her mother, who still clipped every headline, good or bad. The taste of pride soured. She hit save, but not send. There was one more voice, her own inner narrator, still unconvinced. Dusk settled purple over the Potomac. Bondi stood at her window watching headlights spool across the bridge phone in hand deadline creeping. Cross suggested they extend 24 hours show magnanimity, but she shook her head. Justice deferred too long invited cynicism. At 10:47 p.m., Mercer emailed a single-line subject request for minor edit statement attached. Bondi opened the draft. The apology remained intact, dollars unchanged, but AOC added a final paragraph pledging to introduce bipartisan legislation on social media transparency, co-sponsored, if Bondi would help craft it. Cross read over her shoulder, whispered, "That's legacy." Bondi's chest tightened. This was bigger than victory. She typed, "Agreed," and pressed send at 11:06. 11:15. AOC refreshed her inbox, saw Bondi's assent exhaled so sharply, Layla looked up from the couch. Mercer drafted filing paperwork to stay the damages trial. Carmen scheduled a joint press conference for noon Monday on the courthouse steps. Outside, thunder rumbled, but it sounded less like ominous drums now, more like a sky exhaling tension. Yet far from Washington, in a basement studio run by an incendiary podcaster who thrived on perpetual outrage, a different plot stirred. A former AOC aide fired weeks earlier clutched a hard drive labeled insurance and promised revelations too salacious for mainstream networks. The host grinned, cued a Monday morning release designed to torch any fragile truce before it sparked. Back in DC, neither Bondi nor AOC knew the fuse had been lit anew. They slept, one in measured gratitude, the other in wary relief, unaware that dawn threatened to shatter the peace they'd forged just minutes before. Monday broke crystal clear, the air scrubbed by overnight rain, as camera risers sprouted like saplings outside the E. Barrett Prettyman Courthouse. At precisely 11:55 a.m., Pam Bondi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez emerged from separate entrances, then converged at a single lectern set beneath the marble portico. Two women who had spent months locked in existential combat, now standing shoulder to shoulder. Microphones bristled, satellite dishes pivoted. Bondi spoke first. Voice measured, the litigation had served its purpose. Truth had been vindicated, and she was pleased to announce resolution that asked no monetary concession beyond a symbolic $1, which she would donate immediately. AOC followed, reading the apology she'd agonized over, acknowledging her words had outpaced her verification, expressing regret for harm, pledging renewed commitment to facts. She paused only once, eyes flicking to Bondi in silent thanks, then delivered the surprise coda. The two camps would collaborate on a bipartisan Digital Responsibility and Transparency Act, creating civil penalties for knowingly false viral claims and incentives for quick corrections. Reporters gasped. An audible ripple of shutters followed as Bondi nodded. When questions erupted, both sides kept answers tight, no victory laps, just restrained resolve. By 12:30, the live feeds cut back to studios where anchors marveled at a story that seemed against every modern instinct to close on grace. But 20 blocks away, in a dim basement decked with LED strips, the podcaster known to 600,000 subscribers as Razorjack queued up a file dump titled Bondi Gate. At 1:00 p.m., his episode, auto-published across, feeds an hour-long rant intercut with screen-shared PDFs, alleged internal emails between Bondi's early donors and a Florida oil lobby discussing strategic lawsuit smokescreen, plus a blurry selfie of a man resembling Bondi's nephew at a beach party beside a MAGA banner. Razorjack framed it as proof the lawsuit had always been a coordinated GOP hit designed to chill progressive speech. Within minutes, hashtags like Drow Settlement Scam and Drow Bondi Cover trended on X. Progressive influencers who'd just typed cautious applause jerked the wheel, demanding investigations into whether AOC had capitulated under pressure from petroleum money. Inside a black SUV rolling toward the hill, AOC watched her phone explode. Carmen, still remote, sent frantic texts. New leak paints you as sellout collaborating with Big Oil. Bondi's team received the same alerts. Elena forwarded a link showing the supposed donor emails had no DKIM signatures, timestamps misaligned by 2 years. Cross called Mercer on speaker. These look fabricated. We need a joint rebuttal fast, or the settlement dies in the cradle. Mercer agreed, but warned public perception moved faster than forensic analysis. AOC, heart-pounding, asked if the judge had filed the dismissal yet. Mercer said paperwork wouldn't hit the docket until 4 p.m., 3 hours to staunch bleeding. Bondi's SUV, one lane behind by coincidence, signaled. Both vehicles pulled onto a side street near the Library of Congress. For the first time since the apology, the adversaries stepped into the same shadowed alcove engines idling around the corner. Bondi's expression was equal parts resolve and weariness. "We can kill this by releasing server header proof," she said, "but we must speak together again today." AOC nodded, lashes blinking rapid. "People already think I bent the knee. If we don't crush it in an hour, they'll crucify both of us." Elena routed calls to a private digital forensics firm. Preliminary check, SPF, fail mismatched time zones. EXIF data on the beach selfie showed a Lightroom export dated last week, not 2019. Carmen pushed out a tweet from AOC's official account linking a statement signed by both camps' newly surfaced files appear fabricated. "We are securing independent verification and will pursue legal remedies against malicious actors seeking to undermine today's resolution." Yet the algorithm favored video, and Razorjack was already live streaming a victory lap, watched by 90,000 furious viewers. In St. Louis, a progressive PAC halted recurring donations until full clarity emerged. In Pensacola, a conservative talk show host demanded Bondi prove she hadn't blackmailed AOC into the apology. Moderates just felt whiplash. At 2:10 p.m., Cross and Mercer hustled into the cyber forensics office, both legal teams squeezed around a conference table littered with drive images and energy drink cans. A technician projected metadata, forged headers, SHA-1 mismatches, GPS coordinates of the beach selfie, pointing to a public Instagram posted 3 days earlier by an entirely different family. Evidence of a frame job grew undeniable, but social media didn't wait for hashes. Bondi called her U.S. Marshal contact. Tessa was safe, but Razorjack's fanboards were doxing her parents' Indiana farm. Cross filed an emergency motion asking Judge Harlan to unseal technical findings and issue a protective injunction. The clerk promised docket entry within the hour. Yet while the adults chased signatures and chain of custody proofs, Razorjack pushed a second-wave edited deposition clips, sliced to make Bondi seem evasive about the Trump Foundation donation, AOC portrayed as tearfully admitting she'd sold out. The montage rocketed across TikTok, garnished with ominous synth bass. Cable bookers hungry for fresh heat invited Razorjack for prime time. At 3:05 p.m., Elena's phone pinged with a short message Fox producer requesting Bondi at 8 to respond. 30 seconds later, Carmen got the parallel email from MSNBC. Battle Line's redrawn outrage refreshed like it had slept 8 hours. Cross closed his laptop, turned to both principals. "We can chase each fire or strike at the arsonist." Mercer nodded. Defamation countersuit against Razorjack DMCA takedowns. Maybe a joint congressional referral for coordinated disinformation. But that road meant more litigation, more months, more cameras. Bondi looked at AOC. Fatigue and resolve mirrored back. "I'm not letting him turn honest repentance into clickbait," she said. AOC dragged a hand through her hair. "Then let's take him to court together." For the faintest beat, both women almost laughed at the absurd symmetry. Cross drafted cease and desist language while Mercer cued a federal complaint template. Outside clouds gathered thunder muttered again over the Potomac as though the sky itself refused to grant them a calm sunset. At 3:47 p.m., the courthouse docket pinged live order parties, notify court of potential fraudulent evidence, dismissal held in abeyance pending verification hearing Wednesday 9 a.m. The fragile peace paused settlement now hanging by procedural thread. In media newsrooms, producers flipped scripts from story over to twist continues. Razorjack cracked open a Red Bull on air and promised viewers an exclusive drop by dawn. Cross emailed a single line to Mercer, "We're back in the arena," the reply. "Then we fight side by side." And as DC's streetlights blinked on against bruised clouds, two former enemies prepped for a new war against a foe fluent in chaos, knowing that one misstep could plunge the country back into the very abyss they had tried for a fleeting hour to close. Night swelled over Washington like ink in water, while two impromptu war rooms pulsed opposite ends of K Street. In Bondi's suite, Cross stacked fresh pleadings, a dual complaint naming Razorjack legal name Travis Lynn Rully for defamation, plus tortious interference, and an emergency motion demanding YouTube, Spotify, and X preserve all upstream metadata. AOC, seated beside him, scrawled her signature below Bondi's. Their pens clicked in an odd duet that drew a weary smile from Elena. Mercer rehearsed an opening salvo for the Wednesday verification hearing show. The court-forged headers spotlight GPS mismatches, call an FBI cyber unit agent to testify. They had 40 hours to weld two legal cultures, conservative discipline, progressive flair, into one seamless brief. Outside sirens stitched the night together. Inside political labels dissolved into simple pronouns we and they. Meanwhile, across the river, Travis Razorjack Rully, broadcast from his neon cave, sweat darkening the bill of a trucker hat, branded No Mercy. He promised a sunrise megadrop of 20 more emails, allegedly proving years-long collusion between Bondi and Coke emissaries. His chat scrolled like a slot machine, skull emojis, hang her AOC traitor flooding at 500 comments per minute. What viewers couldn't see were the Discord DMs blinking on a side monitor, an anonymous supplier named Medusa4 demanding $25,000 in Bitcoin for the next tranche, and hinting the files came from an inside federal source. Travis hesitated. He'd drained his own crypto nights earlier pumping Doge, but fame demanded fuel. He wired the coin without vetting. 5 minutes later, a zip archive landed, no checksums, no provenance. The podcaster zipped it open anyway, feeding the outrage furnace another unverified load. Back in the Allied legal bunker, a forensics tech named Priya Singh ran the first spoofed PDFs through an entropy scanner. She barked a laugh. Font metadata showed Adobe Build 2025 impossible for a 2019 document. Cross's eyebrow rose. Sloppy. Priya dug deeper, tracing IP breadcrumbs to a disposable VPN endpoint out of Prague that in turn tunneled through a server farm notorious for botnet rentals. AOC leaned over the monitor, heat surging behind her eyes. Someone wants the truce dead. Bondi nodded, voice soft but flinty. And they're comfortable overseas. Mercer suggested looping in Homeland Security. Cross preferred the Bureau jurisdiction, cleaner optics, non-partisan. Elena drafted a joint referral letter, while Carmen crafted a thread explaining falsified metadata in plain language, 1 tweet 6 bullet point screenshot of Adobe build tags. They scheduled it for 6 a.m., time to intercept Razorjack's promised drop. At 3 a.m., a marshal knocked with grim news. Tessa's parents' barn in Indiana had been torched, no injuries, but local deputies found culture justice for AOC spray-painted near the smouldering frame. Bondi's jaw locked. AOC covered her mouth. Cross made the call to the judge at once, leaving a voicemail and then filing a supplemental declaration evidence of retaliatory violence just hours after falsified leaks. The marshal detail doubled. Both principals would travel under armed escort until further notice. Dawn cracked pale and mean. Carmen hit publish on the thread. Eleanor cross-posted. 3 minutes later, Razorjack's video went live, breathless, waving PDFs like holy writ. But this time the algorithmic tide shifted. Replies pasted Priya's font metadata screenshot underneath every claim. Quote tweets mocked his time-traveling Adobe Network security pros, weighed in, calling the files laughably forged. View counts plateaued. Sponsors yanked ads midstream. Worse, X's trust and safety team, primed by Cross's preservation motion, froze Razorjack's account pending review. He slammed fists on his desk, begged viewers to migrate to a backup site, but the stampede never materialized. Panic sweat beaded as donation bars stalled. At 8 a.m., Judge Harlan convened an unscheduled teleconference. Bondi and AOC appeared side by side on a split screen, Mercer and Cross flanking. Harlan's tone was glacial. Counsel, I've reviewed your filings and the photographic evidence from Indiana. This court will not become a stage for digital vandals. He ordered federal marshals to secure Tessa's family, instructed DOJ cybercrime to investigate Prague nodes, and reaffirmed that dismissal would remain stayed until Wednesday's in-person authentication demo. If the proffered expert analysis proves fraudulent origination, he warned the court will consider contempt sanctions and referrals for criminal prosecution. C-SPAN carried the call audio live. Midday anchors reframed the narrative yet again. Unlikely alliance defends truth against foreign troll farm. Older viewers who had doubted AOC's sincerity warmed to her measured cooperation. Progressive outlets cautiously praised Bondi's restraint. Polling firm Public Signal tweeted crosstabs trust in both women up 5 points across party lines, the first bipartisan credibility bump in years. Yet victory was far from sealed. Priya reported a fresh wave of bot accounts hammering the apology statement with identical language joint cover-up hides deeper compromat. Someone with real resources wanted chaos extended. Cross authorized a counterintel subcontractor to trace botnet control. If it led to a domestic actor, civil liability could broaden. At 5 p.m., that subcontractor reported a match. The Prague traffic ultimately looped through a residential ISP block in West Palm Beach, registered to a Shell LLC, whose incorporator once served as digital director for a fringe pack dismantled after an FEC dark money probe. Bondi recognized the name. She'd prosecuted a mail fraud cousin years back. Coincidence felt thin. Mercer prepped a motion to compel third-party document discovery. They'd need to move fast to freeze servers before drives were wiped. AOC, eyes gritty, asked, "What if we can't pierce that shell?" Bondi answered, "Then we litigate the ghost. Money judgments follow assets even in hiding." But both women sensed financial penalty alone wouldn't cauterize the wound. The real goal was deterrence, a public example that forging evidence to reignite outrage had a non-partisan cost. Carmen suggested turning Wednesday's hearing into an open educational session. Invite press to watch digital authentication step by step. The judge would need convincing, but transparency could vaporize future disinfo before it sparked. Night descended again, a humid shroud. AOC walked the quiet corridor to Bondi's temporary office, knocked lightly. For the first time, she entered without security escort. They shared black coffee, no sugar, while Cross and Mercer worked phones in the next room. "I can't believe we're here," AOC said, voice low. Bondi chuckled without mirth. "2 weeks ago, I prayed I'd never see you again." They sat in companionable exhaustion. AOC asked whether Bondi truly planned to give any dollar, even the symbolic one, away. Bondi nodded. "I never wanted your money. I wanted the line back." AOC stared at her cup. "And will you actually co-sponsor the bill?" Bondi's answer was instant yes. "Draft hits committee council tomorrow." For a heartbeat, politics felt possible again, but the moment cracked as Mercer hurried in holding a tablet server. Logs showed a remote wipe command initiated 90 seconds earlier on the West Palm machine. Evidence was disappearing in real time. Cross barreled behind him, already dialing DOJ contacts. "We might have minutes," he said. Bondi shot to her feet. AOC followed, and in that charge, scramble keyboards clacking subpoenas, printing a digital clock racing toward midnight. Segment 14 slams shut, leaving every truth they'd fought to salvage balanced on whether they could catch a phantom hacker before the last byte vanished into the dark. Cross barked coordinates into his phone, while Priya tunneled into the ISP gateway, fingers gliding across the keyboard like a concert pianist racing the metronome. Packet traces rolled in green and red cascades, each hop a breadcrumb deeper into the phantom's burrow. AOC hovered behind her, heart hammering, as Bondi contacted the Bureau's Cyber Operations Watch Desk. Within 4 minutes, a federal trace order flashed across the backbone. 30 seconds later, an agent confirmed interception of the remote wipe stream and forced a hard disconnect at the Florida node. Priya exhaled, shoulders sagging. Drives frozen. Data survived barely. Morning arrived, wired and breathless. Marshals escorted both legal teams into Harlan's courtroom, the gallery packed tight with journalists now treating digital forensics like championship sports. Priya took the stand first, walking the judge through header-spoofing Prague VPN relays, time travel fonts, and the abortive 3 a.m. wipe. She ended with the kicker log files proving the command originated inside Travis Raleigh's basement studio. Raleigh's counsel, hired overnight, tried objecting on chain of custody grounds. Harlan overruled, noting marshals and bureau agents had stood watch from seizure to server image. Next came an FBI specialist who mapped the Shell LLC back to a dissolved PAC whose last treasurer was Raleigh's college roommate. The motive became clear. Outrage meant clicks meant crypto, and yesterday's bipartisan peace threatened the entire business model. At the close of testimony, Harlan removed his glasses, voice low but lethal. He reaffirmed the Bondi AOC settlement lifted the stay, dismissed the damages phase with prejudice, and referred Raleigh for federal prosecution under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 371 conspiracy and Paragraph 1028 A7 identity fraud. He also scheduled a separate evidentiary hearing on whether the Ghost Packy's former principals would face civil conspiracy claims. This court, he said, will not allow digital arsonists to profit from burning the truth. A murmur of something like relief fluttered through benches normally allergic to consensus. Outside, the sun was brilliant, the humidity mercifully low. Bondi and AOC stepped to the microphones together, neither smiling yet unmistakably allied. Bondi announced filing of the Digital Responsibility and Transparency Act, already co-sponsored by 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and pledged her symbolic dollar to the Knight First Amendment Institute's Defamation Defense Fund. AOC spoke next, voice steady, if still raw, promising to hold her own side accountable with the same vigor she once reserved for opponents. She quoted Lincoln as Bondi had weeks ago. Truth is generally the best vindication, and added, but only if we defend it together. Reporters peppered them with questions about political futures. Bondi deflected Senate rumors, AOC sidestepped re-election chatter, each insisting today was about closing wounds, not plotting campaigns. Razorjack's empire collapsed hour by hour. Platforms yanked channels. Advertisers fled, Patreon froze payouts. That evening, marshals arrested Raleigh outside a Gainesville motel laptop, still streaming to a dwindling audience of diehards who watched their avatar vanish mid-rant. Cable hosts left and right spent the next news cycle marveling that forged files could unite 2 ideological opposites more effectively than any bipartisan retreat. Polls showed a 12-point jump in public trust that leaders can correct mistakes, the highest reading since 9/11. Social feeds filled with incredulous memes of Bondi and AOC high-fiving memes, both camps tolerated with newfound humor. Weeks later, under vaulted committee lights, the Digital Responsibility Bill advanced 32-6. Tech lobbyists grumbled, free speech absolutists fretted, but ordinary citizens flooded inboxes with support for provisions requiring political accounts to label unverifiable claims within 24 hours or face algorithmic throttle instead of legal peril. The measure still had gauntlets ahead, filibuster threats, rule-making battles, yet its mere progress felt like cultural tectonics shifting. On a rain-cool Friday in October, Pam Bondi returned to Tampa, greeted by neighbors who once saw public life as poison, but now offered casseroles and cautious admiration. She filed the last court document, a stipulation dismissing all remaining claims upon full implementation of the apology. Then she drove to the Gulf Pier, let briny wind lift her hair, and breathed without adrenaline for the first time in a year. In the Bronx, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped into a modest community hall packed with volunteers. She spoke plainly about humility, about learning that righteous ends never excuse reckless means. Some loyalists had drifted. New faces replaced them, older, more skeptical, yet drawn by candor. When she finished, a retired bus driver raised his hand. If telling the truth costs votes, you still in? She smiled, not the viral grin of past campaigns, but something quieter. Yes, she said, because any movement that can't survive truth isn't worth winning. Far beyond Capitol corridors, the story settled into American folklore, not a courtroom blood sport, but a case where 2 combatants met at truth's thin red line, almost plunged over, then linked arms to drag the republic back. Debate programs cited it, cybersecurity courses dissected it, and late-night comics eventually mined it for bipartisan punchlines, a sign the drama had cooled into shared narrative. 1 year later, Judge Harlan entered his chambers to a handwritten note left on his docket shelf. It read, "Thank you for guarding the line." No signature, just that single sentence, and a folded copy of the enacted Digital Responsibility and Transparency Act. He placed it beside his worn copy of Sullivan, leaned back and allowed himself a rare smile. Outside, autumn leaves swirled across Constitution Avenue, carried on a breeze neither blue nor red, but resolutely, stubbornly American.